Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Bill Mickey. I'm the editorial director at Choice. And on behalf of Choice and Toward Inclusive Excellence, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Inclusive Workplace Practices to Support Mental Health in Higher Education. Today's session is brought to you by Toward Inclusive Excellence, or TIE as we like to call it, a content channel from Choice that explores issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in and outside of the higher education community. If you would like to receive updates about new blog posts in the series, resource lists, and podcast episodes, please use the links in the chat, which I will put in right now. To sign up for the newsletter, read the TIE blog, or follow us on social media. And before we get started, I'll just point out a few features of the webinar software. All of the attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. We are using the Q&A feature today, so please use it to ask questions of our speakers and to submit any comments. We do expect many questions today, and we will likely not have time to get to all of them. So we apologize in advance for that. In the meantime, we will answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the discussion. But feel free to type in your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. They do queue up and we'll have them ready for us at the end. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you like or would like to be addressed, and that's the little thumbs up icon. And that'll let us know that those are important questions for us to ask. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. And last, please note that we are recording today's program and everyone who registered will receive a follow-up email with a link to the archived version. And now we are ready to get started. So I will hand it over to Alexia Hudson-Ward, TIE's editor-in-chief and our moderator for today.
Thank you so much, Bill, and many thanks to the Choice team, and welcome to all of our participants for today's important conversation about inclusive workplace practices to support mental health in higher education. As Bill shared, everyone, the hosting entity for today's panel discussion is Choice Publishing's 2-year-old vertical Toward Inclusive Excellence, or TIE for short. I am proud to serve as TIE's editor-in-chief and to report to you that we were on the shortlist for a major publisher podcast award this year. Please subscribe to TIE's weekly content and follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok. And you see all of the different handles there in addition to YouTube and Instagram. If you plan to contribute to the real-time digital discourse about today's panel discussion, please use the hashtag TIEwebinar. Again, that's TIE, T-I-E, webinar as a combined word as the hashtag. We also ask for your patience and grace as we may encounter some technological issues during our webinar today. Hang in there with us and we'll address the matter as soon as we can. I am thrilled to facilitate today's conversation and introduce 3 remarkable experts on DEI and professional wellness strategies. We'll make sure to place their LinkedIn bios into the chat. There's Dr. Ryan Warner, founder and CEO of RC Warner Consultant. Dr. Corey Bazemore James, Assistant Vice Provost, Graduate School Diversity Office, University of Minnesota, Twin City. And Dr. Alvin Akibar, Director of the Center for Social Justice Research, Policy, and Advocacy of the Urban League Twin Cities. Thank you so much for joining us. So I have some questions and I'll rotate. who we will ask to respond first. And I ask that the panelists use your raised hand feature in Zoom if you want to build on a co-panelist's point or share some additional information. We have about 35 or 40 minutes for this portion of the webinar today. So first, I'd like to start with Corey. It seems that mental health on campus, when it's discussed, it mainly is focused on students' well-being and health outcomes with little to hardly no attention, Corey, on faculty, staff, and administrators, despite there being some recent statistics that suggest that close to 50% of university employees report substantial increase in emotional drain and work-related stress. So how can higher education institutions improve their practices and processes to support the mental well-being of their employees?
Thank you, Alexia. I think there's a lot that we can do. We're in a totally different landscape now that we've experienced this pandemic, the multiple pandemics that we've experienced. And we can't do the same old thing that we've always done, which is a wellness seminar here and there, usually. It's not going to work anymore. I think people are experiencing things more deeply, and it's just, we're not willing to just do the bare minimum anymore. I think people are more vocal about what they're struggling with and the fact that they're struggling. And a lot of higher ed administrators who've been in the field for a long time are not used to how vocal people are these days. And with different generations coming in, they're just more vocal about what the needs are and more direct than we're used to. And I think the first thing that we can do is listen, ask questions, and find out what are people experiencing? What are our own people experiencing? And how, based on what social identities they hold, what types of work they do, how student-facing they are, how are they impacted differently? And what unique things do they need to feel supported? Because they just need to know that they are supported. They need to know that they are seen and heard and understood as members of the campus community, and not as just cogs in the machine that can be easily replaced.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yes, please go right ahead, Alvin. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to build off that. Corey, you made amazing points. I think the reality is it's a different landscape for a lot of folks. They're not necessarily certain of how to respond to. I think not necessarily that things have changed, but that a lot of priorities in life have been realigned and they're now being communicated in ways they previously hadn't been, right? A lot of folks are realizing, especially with this major existential threat, life is short and you want to make sure that you are prioritizing your health and well-being, your ability to be in community with your loved ones, and just your ability to really enjoy the space that you're spending a significant portion of your time with. And I have to reiterate that as much as there might be some pressure to kind of hide the ick, right? To make it seem like all is well on campus for the sake of the students are also paying attention and have grown up in a substantially more tumultuous time than most of us, I think, are cognizant of, right? Traditional age students right now have largely known school shootings and evacuations and, mass shooter drills for their entire lives. So they're not immune to seeing the stress that adults in their lives have been put through. And so likewise, they are especially sensitized to morale on campus in ways that I think many of us take for granted. So if we do see this increased burnout and just destruction of morale on our campuses, you're going to see that play out in the students seeing it firsthand, regardless of what the faculty, staff, and administrators are saying. It can be seen.
Yes, thank you so much. Both of you raised some really important points that I would like for us to further iterate upon. So one thing that you said, Corey, that I think is so important is that some institutions' practices really rely heavily on seminars or webinars or, these kinds of one-way dialogues through which that training matters, but it doesn't necessarily get to the heart of what we're seeing, encountering, experiencing, and facing in relationship to inclusive workplace practices in higher ed to advance better mental health outcomes. So can you talk a little more, Corey, about, beyond the webinar, beyond the kind of turnkey solution, what are some other things that can happen in relationship to helping employees in universities thrive and feel better?
Sure. Yeah, I think acknowledging that there's a change is a big thing. Hearing it vocalized, we know, we understand, we see, and we want to know how we can best support you, the staff, the faculty. I think we've been making a lot of strides in flexibility in work, and that should continue. I think a lot of institutions are moving kind of backwards again, back to the old ways of working. And I don't think that's good for anyone's mental health. I think we've been needing a change in that for a long, long time. And we finally had this reckoning during COVID. And a lot of people are not willing to go back to that. And so when we think about worker retention or hiring, these are the things that people are asking about. Can I work from home? Can I work remotely? This is very important to me now. And so listening to what's important to people for them to be their best selves at work. I think thinking about people first, people before productivity, people before the work, caring about our people as if they are members of our own families goes a long way for people feeling cared about and valued in an organization. Providing time during the workday for stress relieving, whether it is attending a webinar, maybe that's helpful for some folks, or maybe it's spending time in an affinity space in which they talk about mental health or other supportive networks. Time for some light exercise, to step away to go for a walk, spend time with your pet. Finding those small spaces and times throughout the day that help re-energize you. Providing that opportunity is saying, I care about you as a human being.
Yeah, thank you so much. Go right ahead, Ryan. Thank you.
And definitely to add on to that, oftentimes when we think of engaging in self-care or what I like to call work-life harmony, then that may negatively impact performance and outcomes. But in turn, research actually shows the opposite. When we're actually able to take care of ourselves, put ourselves first, and prioritize our employees and our staff, our faculty, then they actually are more engaged, they're more productive, they're more inspired, they're motivated, right? They have the energy and capacity now to handle, what's on their plate. So being able to recognize that is going to help the outcomes as well, and student outcomes. And I also would say, just like during my consulting work with, higher education institutions, I noticed that a lot of senior leadership sometimes feel that it doesn't apply to them. So that sometimes they feel like if you're really high up the pole when it comes to seniority, sometimes
Right.
they feel like, oh, well, we're able to manage stress. Let me help the faculty and the staff. But we also know that research shows that those are actually the most stressed individuals, so it's important to not leave them out as well. And in turn, that's going to set a good model for everyone else.
Brian, thank you so much for that point, because over the course of the time that we have had toward inclusive excellence, understandably so, there has been a lot of conversation around the tension between administrators and faculty on campus, right? And that's a real tension. Yet I also feel that a lot of faculty don't understand when they say the administration, that is a general terminology for all administrative professionals who are not faculty, right? And so there are degrees of administrators. And also, to your really good point, the senior administration, the most senior level leaders within higher education, it's important for them to role model what it means to be human, what it means to negotiate space and place successfully, what it means to have a healthy life perspective and a healthy outcome, because it does impact the institution. And so I appreciate, and the people that work there, live there, go to school there, teach there, et cetera. So I really do appreciate you sharing that. Thank you so much. That's really a vital point. And Alvin, you raised something around multi-generationalism, and I actually do have a question about that because, each generation differs in terms of coping mechanisms to manage workplace duties and stress that can sometimes be in conflict with each other. So what advice do you have in terms of balancing multi-generational work expressions that can harmonize workplace engagement rather than causing more stress and pressure?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Alexia. I think it's definitely been interesting pivoting from higher ed and just seeing in a more multi-general but smaller unit, how quickly those small interactions can kind of build up into something regardless of intent. And so one thing I've noted that we've done on our staff is actually even doing things like actually explicitly naming things that like how we prefer to work, right? How do I prefer to communicate this kind of information versus that kind of information, right? Would I rather get a request written first or, communicated to me verbally first, right? Being able to name a lot of the different particulars and how we best work, even if we can't necessarily change everything structurally within team units and across work units, being able to name those preferences, experiences can help to kind of parse out some of the generational differences so folks aren't seeing, oh, Nancy over here is saying these things because she, looks at me as a, like she looks down on me for my age, but rather, no, Nancy best like takes in information when she gets a chance to read it first and then have it like verbally explained to her as a follow-up, whereas maybe I'm the reverse, right? So naming a lot of generational practices and attitudes and norms can be a great way to help demystify some of that communication. And as you start to streamline the communication, a lot of things will necessarily start to follow up and you can kind of figure out what works for your immediate work group. The other thing I think is, again, naming, being able to do so in a way that folks can hear. It can be a little bit daunting to say, speak on your experience as a representative of your generation, but doing so in a way that's meant to be non-judgmental and importantly, non-prescriptive, right?
Yes.
Saying that you do certain things a certain way, partly because of how you, like what the environments you've been working in, but not doing so in a way that says, I think everyone should do it this way, but rather coming from a place of, I want y'all to understand where I'm coming from. And in turn, I also want to understand where you are coming from so we can harmonize better.
Yeah, thank you for that, because there's a lot of, I think, speaking of tension in the previous conversation we had, I think there's a lot of generational tension around people subscribing to, I'm a boomer, I'm Gen X, I'm a millennial, I'm a zennial, and all these different things. And while they can be guidance, right, in terms of engagement for others, we can't necessarily definitively say that I'm 100% anyway based on any descriptor, right? Yet I do see people doing that in the workplace, and I see the tensions and the stress. I don't want to go so far as to call it anxieties, but I see what you're talking about in terms of people thinking they should be the representative voice of Gen Z in the workplace, or they should be the representative voice of any specific generation. And those things can compromise, as you all have identified, different well-being attempts when we're coming together in this new, semi-COVID, past COVID, new era, particularly with a lot of multimodalism at work. Corey, what are your thoughts in terms of being able to balance these multi-generational expressions and challenges within the workplace?
I think what Dr. Akibar said is really right on, is really about focusing on the individual, because regardless of generation, we're all different individuals and we all have different needs. I think it's important to have open conversations about, okay, we are all different here. We all experience the world differently. We have grown up in different generations of working in higher education. And there's always, one thing we know is higher education is about change. There's always change happening. Happens slowly, glacially, but it's unavoidable. We have to always change, and we always have to be thinking about how do we continuously improve and not get stuck in the way we've always done things. We can't get stuck in, well, I was treated this way, so this is the way I treat people. we have to be willing to meet the next generation where they are. And also share with the next generation, these are great things that came from the older generations that we shouldn't just throw it away just because it's not what's new. And so I
Right.
think having those open conversations and talking about what did you experience, if you've been here longer, what was the norm around mental health and what was the norm around supporting each other, colleagues, supporting students, like what was the norm? And what are we experiencing now? What are people saying they need now? It's different. And what can we do to bridge that gap? How do we make sure that we're changing in the ways that's most useful and helpful for us as human beings?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. And Ryan, I would imagine that in your practice, you've seen different ways to operationalize some of the harmonizing of workplace engagement across the generations. So can you talk a little bit about that? And what do you see as success strategies that could be easily replicated?
Well, first, I think we need to recognize the impact of bias and how that may negatively interfere with that harmony within multiple, interactions between multiple generations. Oftentimes we say, oh, those Generation Zers, right? We have that bias towards that group, or the baby boomers, they're so old school, right? And so we come up with this bias and that then negatively impacts our interactions. And in turn, right, we may feel that we can't go to certain groups, when various mental health challenges or stresses arise. So recognizing number one, we need to figure out how does that bias look interpersonally, okay? Then also, how does that bias look maybe systemically within our policies? Are there certain policies and procedures that are biased towards certain age groups or certain demographics? What assumptions are we making, regarding those age, gaps and differences? And also we need to recognize that difference actually makes us stronger. Okay. So we're more productive. We are more innovative, right? When we're able to celebrate difference in the workplace. So, hey, how can I learn from this person who may be a different generation than me? They may have a different mentality, but if I am able to share my perspective, they're able to share their perspective, as then it's going to harmonize that workplace, because now we're celebrating difference instead of feeling that difference brings us apart.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Go right ahead, Alvin.
Yeah, I also want to touch on something that I think really is something we can overlook at times, that while there may be generational differences and norms around them, there's also a big difference in institutional power. So we might see that while there are generational differences in norms and practices for each generation, one generation was there first and subsequently may have shaped more of the norms in the workplace around it, but maybe in different platforms and settings, let's say in the technology side of settings, the younger folks or the folks who are just like socialized in a lot of the digital spaces might be setting norms in ways that are then bristled against. But in both administration versus the faculty, which, those delineations are a little bit watery when many administrators are also faculty, but likewise with generational differences, it's important to be sensitized to the power differential, because it's easy to say sometimes, oh yes, we should absolutely, listen to the old school folks and then also listen to the newer school folks, but also be mindful of what of our norms are informed by our generational practices and how do we harmonize that. Maybe we're seeing what we're interpreting as like a lot of pushback from, say, the youngest of our workers or the lowest level on the ladder of our staff, and maybe they're not necessarily pushing hard, but they're pushing in a way that the current structure is not set up for, because the folks who have been here longer have actually created that structure.
Yeah, no, these are all really beautiful and brilliant points. And I'll use myself as an example to try to tie together some of the things that you're talking about in terms of impacts on individuals from a mental health perspective. So as a Black woman who is a Gen Xer who came up at a time in which identity was not celebrated, it was diminished, and work was largely compartmentalized. I was sharing with some other colleagues that the first crises through which we thought remote work was going to happen 100% was 9/11, right? And we learned, for those of us who were old enough working back then, and I remember, being involved in all these different conversations around how every sector was going to change. We were going to, be more egalitarian, et cetera, and it didn't happen, right? Now fast forward, see how it's like, yes. And then fast forward to the global crisis of COVID, same situation, but more stressful, right? And I would say that I think in many ways, my generation and those that are older, we had the toughest time with it. And I think that that tough time is expressing itself in practices that are not healthy always and helpful within the workplace. And so, for example, when you come up as a young adult with compartmentalization, you don't want the blending of life and work at all. Home is home, personal is personal, work is work. Yet, younger generations are like, it all blurs because we spend so much time at work, right? And so that tension then arises around, well, I don't want to talk about my cat, or I don't want, I don't want to be on Zoom all day, right? Like that's a source of stress for me, right? And I think that it's been tough for a multi-generational conversation around those stressors. So how can we do that, everyone? How can we have a non-threatening dialogue, right? Because the red thread between everything that you all are saying, which is really powerful, is the power of dialogue, right? But how do you enter into that when you come into the discussion from a very different place and space and time as a professional? So a 20-something, a 30-something, 30 years ago is very different than those 20-somethings and 30-somethings today. How can you do it in a way that we can make sure that the workplace remains a mentally healthy space?
I think when you're gearing up for a dialogue that can be a difficult one, it could be a hot topic, could be contentious. It
Yes.
can help to create guidelines, conversation guidelines. You can create your own. You can Google, there's so many great ones out there, and start with your own, but then bring them to the group and say, here's my ideas of what could be our guidelines. What do you have to add or edit, and develop that together? And by having that co-development, you increase buy-in because they've helped determine what are the rules and regulations around having a difficult dialogue, which groups should be having difficult dialogues around this topic and others. So modeling how to engage in that as well is important. Modeling how to take feedback and criticism in a loving way, welcoming feedback, seeking disagreement that's healthy. Just because if I'm the leader of this unit and if one of my staff disagrees with me, I can't be like, nope, you have it wrong and shut down. Right. You have to model, okay, if you have a different opinion of how we do this, that your opinion is just as valid as mine. You're just as experienced as a human as I am. So valuing different voices and opinions and not seeking to find capital T truths, there's only one for anything, but welcoming lowercase multiple truths in any case, and being caring about how different lenses and cultural lenses people come in with are just as valid as one another's.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And that's such a great segue to my next question that I want to pose to Ryan. And so, Ryan, for the first time, at least to my knowledge, the United States Surgeon General issued a framework for workplace mental health and well-being. And it centers workers' voices and equity and offers guidance on how to best operationalize DEIA norms, programs, and priorities in the workplace. And one of the things that I find compelling about this concept is the idea of mattering at work, similar to what all of you are talking about. And it emphasizes how dignity matters and encourages workers' engagement in decision-making, as Corey just identified. So how can higher education emphasize mattering at work, and how mattering is essential to one's mental health and well-being?
So who doesn't want to go to work, right, and feel that they matter and feel that they belong, that their ideas are important, that they're contributing to a cause bigger than themselves, right? But sometimes, when we go to work, especially in higher education, we may, lose that sense of maybe purpose or attachment, to something bigger. So it's extremely important that messages of gratitude, of appreciation, recognition, are, authentic. Okay. And, there obviously needs to be some policy changes, procedure changes that show people that they matter. So for instance, giving someone an award, but then saying, hey, I need you to come in every weekend, to finish X task, then that's probably not going to be as helpful, right? But how can we really identify first what matters to faculty, to staff, to administrators? What do they want? Maybe just one day off here and there that they don't have to use their leave, that'd be really helpful for them. Or maybe they just need some flex time, right? And be able to a little bit more flexible schedule, right? So being able to identify what they need, and as much as it allows, like how can you support them where they're at? That's a very simple way to show that they actually matter. And we're actually going to shift how things operate at this institution to show that, you are valuable, right? That can be really powerful.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I think that particularly those of us on the administrative side, we're fix-it people, right? But do we ask people before we try to fix it? like that's the whole thing. Alvin, please go right ahead.
Yeah, I think I honestly, that's the fix it people comment really hits, because I think a lot of administrators can be hit like you are given a problem and your career kind of rises or falls based on how well you address this large, complex problem that affects hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And you're just being tasked with making the right decision, knowing that there may never be a single right decision. And so my big thing is that being mindful of, when you are oftentimes kind of in the silos doing a lot of deep knowledge work, problem solving work, trying to understand a complex issue, be mindful of your face time with your stakeholders, right? Are they only seeing you when you are coming to give them bad news? Or are they seeing you at these events and whatnot? When you're communicating with them, are you like I say basics like please and thank you are free, right? They're a free and easy way to let folks know that you appreciate them and recognize what they're doing, and doing so in a genuine manner, because you might only see, you might see individual faculty and staff members, on the day-to-day basis, but when you're addressing them as a group, they're typically going to have that, like many of those who you don't see are only going to see you then. So when you come in front of your colleagues, what are you presenting to them? How are you treating them in that moment? Because those kinds of things really do matter. Though, failing to see or recognize the contributions of your stakeholders, of your colleagues, of the folks who are also working towards the betterment and sustenance of your university can be a really quick way to watch morale take a dip.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. These are all really important points. And at the essence of it is not compartmentalizing workplace well-being and mental health as a singular expression, right? That we have to think about it in totality, not dissimilar to how our colleagues in student affairs think about whole student development, right? That we have to think about whole employee, whole environment, whole institutional development when we're trying to tackle something so major as workplace well-being and mental health. So thank you. Yeah, Ryan, please go right ahead.
I would just add that we have to be proactive and not reactive. And this may answer one of the questions in the chat box as well. How can we, not just wait until something horrific happens, before we intervene and say, oh, this is a priority, right? So we may not know if these things are happening within our various departments. Therefore, we need to collect data. Okay. We all probably have seen, cultural climate surveys and things like that. But what about focus groups? What about being able to hear firsthand from those, on the ground doing this work and identifying what are their concerns? What do they see? What are the trends and themes that arise? Right. And then how can we get ahead of the ball? How can we, ensure that we're being proactive? And in turn, that's going to, just strengthen that environment. And then again, all voices are going to be heard. And now we have individuals engaged in that decision process.
Right. Right. And that's so key, is to have as much as possible. I mean, we don't want to overstep the professional boundaries of our colleagues who this is their specialization, right? So there are colleagues who are tasked and charged to address the whole spectrum of needs from a mental health perspective. However, when we're talking about things in relation to just better being, policies, governance, procedures, protocol, the ways in which it's important for those circumstances that we consult widely, that we have the opportunity to have conversation, especially with the people who are going to be most impacted, right? So that is really appreciated, everything that you're saying. Thank you. I want to pivot really quickly, and this is a question that could be open to anyone about people who represent marginalized communities within higher education who find themselves doing a lot of invisible labor. And so we all know that the Academy's number of people from marginalized communities remains relatively small. And that's across every employee in air quotes classification, faculty, staff, administration, right? And these individuals often shoulder a tremendous amount of DEI-centered invisible labor that usually requires confidentiality, like supporting students or even sometimes supporting each other when they are victims of discrimination, the whole range of isms, etc. And the silent and invisible labor can absolutely impact people's mental health. So what must be done to support these people who shoulder these hidden differences? And whomever would like to jump in, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I'll hop in. I think first and foremost, developing those sincere and positive relationships with with your employees is a big part of that, because no matter what, if they're going through something and they don't have a relationship where they can tell you since genuinely about what's going on with them, how they're doing, and what their needs are, it may not matter what you do specifically, because you will never actually know that they're dealing with this extra strain. But when they, in the presence of that kind of relationship, having some real acknowledgement of that labor itself, right?
Yeah.
Think about the way that you evaluate, many of us have some kinds of performance evaluation, annual evaluation of the work that you've done that year. Think about what kinds of questions that you're asking for that, and check whether those questions line up with the values that you communicate to them when they come in. Are you telling them, hey, we really value diversity, and maybe you're evaluating faculty and you're seeing, oh, we asked them how many publications they got last year, how much grant funding they got, how many classes they taught in XYZ area, and we ask literally nothing about the thing that we claim to value, right? So
right.
If, even with confidentiality being a factor, there are ways that we can value a lot of the DEI work and initiatives our faculty are taking on, and maybe even doing things like taking some of the labor of documenting these things that we're asking them to do off of their plate. So knowing, hey, I just asked this faculty member to help us come up with a racial symposium topic and reach out to speakers for all of this. I should also give them some of the credit for helping put this event together, because this would not have happened without them. And this may not have been something that was on their plate previously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to add on that as well. Also, don't be afraid to bring in external support, because oftentimes we say, oh, we have this budget. But what happens is, you put that extra strain on, faculty of color and those who identify as historically marginalized, and now that impacts retention. So now you have the potential of losing that person, right? And
right.
that has a financial burden as well, right? So recognizing that you can bring in external support, to help with these efforts, and also recognize that diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's responsibility. Okay.
Yes.
It's those who identify as socially marginalized, right? Now there may be a lot of hurdles there. I mean, doing this work, every day I talk with organizations and they say, oh, well, I identify as a, white male, with privilege, and I don't feel like I can relate, and that's why I lean on, people of color, faculty of color to assist, right? But just bringing up those challenges, having these hard conversations, right? Identify, hey, how can I support you? I'm recognizing that you may, be doing a lot of work outside of your normal tasks and duties. What support do you need, right? Being that ally, being the advocate is essential. So everyone can pitch in to supporting these efforts. And also diversity, equity, and inclusion is a journey, is not a destination. Okay, you can't get to hiring this amount of people, right, or these amount of trainings per year and feel like, hey, I reached the point where we're good to go as an institution.
Yes, thank you. Corey, did you want to jump in with some thoughts?
Yeah, I've been excited to see that some institutions are starting to include this type of work, working with students of color, working with marginalized communities as an important service component in the tenure and promotion process for faculty. And that should be for all faculty, that they have that option. For years and years and years, faculty of color, BIPOC faculty have been penalized for doing the things they love the most, supporting those students who look like them, have been penalized for having those students all come to them because maybe they're the only one available and they desperately need the support of someone who understands them. And faculty are putting in, staff as well, so much time and energy and emotional labor that just is work that is important culturally and comes from their heart and is important to them, and someone needs to do it. But it is so much added labor that is
Yes, it is.
so rarely recognized, so rarely compensated, and often works against us. And so thinking about how do we also reward that work, whether it's part of their job title or not. In my office, I oversee staff who do diversity work, and we do diversity work across campus. So it is the work that we do. And also it is very tiring and it is emotionally heavy because we're having conversations every day with people who don't understand. And it is about our own identities. And it's hard work. And we're having conversations every day with students who are so impacted, so negatively impacted by some faculty person, some program, some experience they've had on campus, and we're carrying that weight. And it is a lot to carry. And so I think acknowledgement that that is real and that is a part of the work that we do. And it is part of the work that some of us have signed up for, and it's not some of the work that others of us have signed up for. Not all of us, because we hold marginalized identities, want to do that work, and that's okay too. And so also promoting promoting to faculty and staff who have different cultural identities to do what is healing for them. For me, as an Indigenous person, it is important for me to have time to go home for ceremony. And I travel, I travel hours away to get home for ceremony. And some ceremonies are really long. And if I didn't have the ability to be there and be fully present in ceremony in the way that I would normally be, then I can't be my whole healthy self at it. And so finding out for individuals, what is it that's healing for you? And how do we make sure we make space for you to interact in that way?
Yeah, thank you all so much. This has been such a great conversation. I could talk to you all day, but we all got to go back to work, dagnabbit, right? So, we've heard a lot of really good dialogue points around, inclusive practices to assure mental health in higher education workplaces. Red threads abound in terms of dialogue, in terms of policy, relating to each other, not just as generational beings, but understanding that that's an essential part of identity. And so having discourse around the differences, but in a harmonizing way, elevating, celebrating, and acknowledging invisible labor in a way that's really deeply intentional. I think these are all really fantastic touch points and ideas for our listeners and viewers today to think about. So I have one last question before we open it up to Q&A with our participants. And thank you, participants, for hanging in there, and also to those who are viewing. So what can we do? What is the one thing that anybody in the audience could do to support healthy work environments and prioritize mental health now? So what is the one thing that we could do?
I think one thing we all can do is develop our own boundaries and role model
Yes,
doing that.
yes,
So-
yes.
Whether it's not answering emails after hours or not too much, I know I personally have a tendency to say yes to everything. And so I
Yes.
just model for my staff that it is okay to say no.
Yes, thank you for that. And I'm guilty of the after hour email replies. So I hear you. I take and receive that. Other thoughts, Brian and Alvin?
Yeah, honestly, I appreciate you naming the boundaries element, Corey, because that's been one of the big things. I often say work-life balance is a myth, but work-life boundaries are real. And I think that, and Ryan speaking to work-life harmony again, like I think striking it as a balancing act kind of hits at the idea that you are constantly having to work at this, and that you may never actually strike a balance, and that negates the ebb and flow of our lives. But I think speaking to kind of the relational element of work, have someone's back, right? It can be really easy to say, yes, what can I do to support you? But then have someone maybe be given undue attention or negative attention for doing work that objectively makes the workplace better. Have their back, right? Speak to like, hey, to your supervisor, to your coworker, I really appreciated the way that you did this, and not just quietly after the big public confrontation or conversation, but even in that moment, hey, I know that you might be getting a lot of flack for this, but I really appreciate you bringing that point up, because it starts to snowball, right? You might feel like, well, I'm afraid what they're going to say or think to me if I stand up for or with this person who may have been named or been put on the spot. But it, like, you starting that also initiates the opportunity for other folks to publicly support folks in a way that most folks from marginalized identities are not used to or expecting to get, and that has a direct hit on their likelihood of being able to stay engaged and stay healthy in that work environment.
Yeah.
And I would add, we have to figure out how we can prioritize ourselves. And oftentimes when I say that out loud, sometimes we feel selfish. Oh, I want to take care of my students first, right? Or my work comes first so I can provide for my family, et cetera. But if we have nothing left in our cup, we can't fill the cup of others. And I'm sure everyone on this call has probably heard that, but it's hard to actually engage in practice, right? So recognize, and also to destigmatize mental health, we have to recognize that it's okay to seek support. Seeking out for help does not make you weak. Okay, it actually makes you stronger because you're able to acknowledge and approach that discomfort and say, hey, I need some additional support, maybe professional support, maybe just family support, whatever that looks like for you. Recognizing that we, as human beings, we're social beings, we can't do it alone. Okay, so it's okay to ask for that help, whatever that help looks like for you in your life.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for a great conversation, Corey, Alvin, and Ryan. This has been wonderful. I now want to turn it over to Bill to see if there are questions from our audience.
All right, thanks everybody. That was amazing. And accordingly, we have some pretty amazing questions. So I'm excited to get to these. So Alexia, I'll pitch this over to you. Lillian asks, I'm in a small unit at a Texas public university. How do I continue to care and show care when DEI has become a dirty word?
Yeah. Our hearts go out to our colleagues who are now, for the first time in documented history, experiencing tremendous political encroachment in this important work. And so what many of us are doing, and in fact, there's a New York Times article that is talking about this important language pivot, is to now have more conversation about belonging and mattering, but still under a DEI framework. And so that it's not that we're abandoning or shifting away from DEI, but it is that it's important to advance the work and not get into kind of semantic arguments or loggerhorns with individuals in a way that it will disable and destroy all of the good work that we've been doing. So we're just making some language pivots. We're talking about inclusive excellence. We're talking about the ways in which mattering has to elevate itself in the workplace. That way, those who are looking at DEI in a negative way can now see themselves as being a part of it, because in some ways, it's interesting, some of the so-called backlash and some of the real backlash against DEI has to do with some individuals not being able to see themselves within this broader DEI framework. So our objective, I think, always has to be to try to even those who are communicating that they're anti-DEI. The reality of the matter is that there is no way that we can successfully adult or be good citizens in this nation and in the world without the underpinnings of a foundation that is built on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and a more just society. The ways in which we communicate that has to be structured so that we can get the work done and not get into tussles with people around language. We're still going to be committed to this work. We're still going to be able to advance the important components, but we have to now do it in a different way so that we don't get derailed, because for those who are vehemently against DEIA, the objective is derailment, and we just cannot let that happen.
Yeah, excellent. And there's a related question that might be, a little bit more granular, and then that is, how do you think work administrators and employers can positively impact staff members who are attacked by others? And then there's a parenthetical, politicians for political purposes.
Yeah, I'd like to turn that to Corey for her advice.
I think it's a lot of the similar advice that we've given throughout the webinar around mental health is about having people's backs, being good allies, and no matter what identities we hold, but especially when we hold identities of power, given the situation, have people's backs, speak up. Don't wait to send them an anonymous email. You don't have to, like Alvin said, oh, you handled that well, or oh, darn, I'm sorry you have to deal with that. That stinks. Like, no, use your voice if you have one that it has more power in the situation. And just talk about how amazing your people are and help their accomplishments and the great work that they're doing, and help them to be reminded that people here care and see them, care about them, see the great work that they do. And the great work they do is more important than whatever the hatred is coming.
Great. And then a question from Rebecca. Could you recommend some ways to initiate these conversations from the lower levels of the organizational structure in ways that might influence those at the top to seriously pursue improvements and discussions of DEI and mental health?
Yeah, let's have Ryan answer that question.
Yeah, great question. So first we have to identify, what objective are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to, be able to have more discussions so we can ultimately have everyone feeling that they belong and that they're included? And how are we going to track, progress? So the reason why a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion type of initiatives fail is because there's sometimes no objective and there's no way to track. Is this even working? So how can we measure progress? And also, where are we going as well on this journey? So having that direction in mind is important. And sometimes maybe it's just, hey, I recognize that there's a lot of microaggressions, or that there's a lot of bias within our institutions, not just on race, but on sexual orientation, on age, on ability status, political affiliation, right, et cetera. And that's having a negative impact in our interactions with our colleagues, our students, our coworkers. So having these conversations, one objective could be, hey, how can we learn to respect each other's opinions? We may not agree, but how can we talk about this in a way that We don't have to feel like it's always confrontational. And in turn, that's going to help our working relationship. That's going to help our alliance, right, as a team, right? So that's just one example. So again, tracking progress, identifying what's the purpose, what's the goal, bringing in external support as needed. Maybe you need an expert facilitator to help these conversations. Establish those group guidelines like we talked about before, so that it's a safe space for people. Those are just some ideas that I have.
Okay, excellent. So a question from Vanessa. Any ideas on maintaining mental health when dealing with micromanagement, toxic leadership, narcissistic leaders, or just receiving constant belittling?
Let's have Alvin answer that question with the precursor that he is not talking about his current workplace.
Oh yeah, no, there's a reason I am in my current workplace, and it is to be in an environment where I'm actively encouraged to do exactly the work that I came to do. So speaking on the, and it happens at different levels. I've been blessed to have a lot of really wonderful supervisors and coworkers and colleagues. And I've also been blessed with the gift of experience and wisdom that comes from dealing with folks who may struggle on the managerial side and seeing kind of where those decision points could have gone a different way and maybe a little more adaptive and useful way. But I think in this case, it's not necessarily just a matter of you're not going to change that person, right? If you have someone who has their ear, you might reach in to converse with them. But if you are not necessarily able to tell them anything that they don't already know, self-preservation is going to be key, right? Finding your folks who you can tap into to kind of refill your cup as they are actively poking holes against it, and maybe fill it with something a little thicker. So have some self-care and recovery plans. And honestly, if it seems like you're not going to be able to get away with them, start formulating what an exit plan could look like for you, and what kinds of things that you would like to be running to rather than running away from, I think are big. Because the reality is, if they're not, there's lots of official channels that you can go through and that can at times be useful, but I'm also, wary to say, yes, go to HR and they will fix it, because we all know that's not always the case. But I think self-preservation first and foremost, to make sure that you're keeping yourself and your core community around you to refill and shore up and survive that as you start planning what thriving looks like for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Corey too.
Yeah, Corey, go right ahead.
I first echo, if this place is toxic for you, if a person is not treating you the way you ought to be treated, it's time to leave. It's time to find a place that will value you and value the work that you do. And this day and age, people are moving about all the time. There's nothing wrong. Doesn't matter if you've been there 10 years or a day. Like, if you know this place is not the space for me, move on, get out of there. There are lots of opportunities elsewhere. Also document. The more you can document what's happened, when, and what they said and how they said, that will help your case if you're going to report. And reporting is good in building a case. Also be aware of what the process is in case reporting is not a good decision for you. But also advice that we give to our graduate students of color all the time is, if you have a faculty advisor who is abusive, who is not supportive, if you don't have the opportunity to change to a better advisor, you're stuck here. Figure out what they are useful for. What are they good for? What can they offer you? And what other expectations are you putting on them that is just hurting you to have those expectations of them? So think about that with the supervisor, the colleague, whatever the situation is. If they're not a good person for you and it is better for you to stay, really do some self-reflection on what can you realistically expect them to do that's helpful. How can you use them? What tool are they to you? And where do you get your other expectations elsewhere? Who else can you go to for the other needs that you have?
Great, thank you. Bill, I think we have time for one more question.
Great. Yeah, so Barbara asks, what are some actionable ways that admin faculty can acknowledge the DEI efforts of adjuncts who, due to their part-time status, do not often have a voice in the educational framework?
Yeah, anyone who would like to jump in for that.
I think some of this
Oh,
is
you're,
structural. Yeah, like
yes,
when it
yes.
comes to the we call it the adjunct trap sometimes, right? It's kind of holding on, whereas and treating adjuncts as kind of less than employees, even though they're still getting more face time with their students than a lot of us may, and really contributing a necessary and important part of our university. So I think empowering your adjuncts as much as possible, paying them well enough that they can, reasonably take on this work. So advocating for that, as someone who has a voice in the budget conversation, advocate to pay your adjuncts a more competitive wage. And you can even come from the angle that it makes your university more competitive to get the best teachers and free agents and folks who want to do this because they love it and not just out of survival, even though a lot of folks will still have a combination of both, right? Empower your adjuncts, reach out to them for real feedback, and potentially sometimes do so in a way that's anonymized so that fear of retaliation or retribution can be diminished, not entirely, but at least a bit, so you can hear what they really think, what their experiences of things are, and give them a chance to have their voices heard, both publicly and privately.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Their
thank
voice, I just want to add, their voice definitely does matter, right? Because their work is directly aligned with the strategic plan and we're the mission that the institution is going, right? So they should be able to engage in those discussions as well.
Yeah, and Corey, go right ahead.
I would add not only adjuncts, but postdoctoral fellows. Postdoctoral fellows have some of the worst mental health difficulties of all people on campus because they are treated as not faculty, even though they are, or not researchers, even though they are. They're treated as somewhere between graduate student and peon, So adjuncts and postdoctoral scholars are part of our community. They're part of our program. They're a part of the university. And so we need to listen to them, maybe host focus groups or anonymous surveys and find out what is your experience here and what is needed to make you feel as a valued member of this community and as an engaged member of our team.
Yes, thank you. And the last word to Alvin.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show, it looks like we got a comment for a resource on this from Laura, looking at the Rutgers strike contract and the language used for adjuncts, because it was very helpful in the negotiations. So that might also be a tangible resource you can go to now that should be available online. So folks who want to have concrete steps, that might be a resource as well.
Great. Thank you so very much, Corey and Ryan and Alvin, for a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Bill, and to Ashley, who is working behind the scenes to ensure the success of this webinar. Thanks to the Choice team, and thanks to all of you who joined us today and sent us amazing questions, many of which we weren't able to get to, but we'll try to figure out other ways to incorporate this important conversation in future TIE dialogues and in future TIE content. Thanks again, everybody. Have an enjoyable day, and we look forward to having you participate in another TIE webinar in the near future. Be well, and thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Wonderful to talk to you all. Take care.
Thank you so much.